What you're hearing is Hardie Fiber Cement Siding living up to its reputation as the siding that helps resist weather damage, no matter what Mother Nature throws its way. James Hardie knows how important a reputation is, especially when you're a home builder. That's why Hardie products withstand the elements better than wood-based siding, with styles to match their strength. Because when home builders work with us, we deliver our best so they can look their best. Protect your reputation with exterior products by James Hardie.
Look around. You can find cars like these on AutoTrader, like that car right in your tail. Or if you're tailgating right now, all those cars doubling as kitchens and living rooms are on AutoTrader too. Are you working out and listening to this ad at the same time? Well, multitasking pro, cars like the ones in the gym parking lot are for sale on AutoTrader. New cars, used cars, electric cars, maybe even flying cars. Okay, no flying cars, but as soon as they get invented, they'll be on AutoTrader. Just you wait. AutoTrader.
Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Hey, back for another episode of NETtlen, a spinoff of the Fun Belt podcast, part of the Believe Network. And I believe, if it's not, I'm still going to say it is. I think the only specialized Sun Belt basketball podcast out there. I know we talk about a bit of everything on the Fun Belt podcast, but we're going to focus exclusively on basketball with this one. And what better time to bring in my guest, also co-host on the Fun Belt podcast, the Dusty Thibodeau from the Warhawk Report, to talk about those Warhawks from ULM coming off a big victory against South Alabama, snapping a 10-game losing streak by beating a team that a couple weeks ago most of us thought was the front runner to win the Sun Belt. So Tibbs, I'm sure you watched the Warhawks lose a lot of games, and then as you were watching this one, what was going through your mind as they kind of pulled away from a good South Alabama team?
It was a bit of frustration because it's like, where's this been all season long? Because the talent's been there. It's always been a real question of the depth and the depth. They have a solid starting five. They have 1-2 guys that could come off the bench, but that's not really enough to be able to win at a D1 level and consistently night in, night out, especially in the Sun Belt.
Yeah, I think you answered your own question about where's this been. It's hard for it to be there night in, night out when, to beat South Alabama, they had to have 4 guys play like 33 minutes or more, something like that. They rely a whole lot on their top guys and have not had the depth. And that was the issue with ULM last year. I don't know. You go back a lot further than me following this team. Has that been kind of like the problem with the Richard's teams for a while, or is it more just the last few years?
I think it's always been maybe a consistency that he's had, even dating back to his days of being down the road at Louisiana Tech, that he's always just kind of only played a handful of guys. And sometimes it's worked where he was able to be in contention for conference titles, but a lot of times it hasn't. Even when you look at kind of the heydays when ULM went on their CBI runs, that was a stacked team that was playing 8-9 guys off the bench or off the roster. And so while you had Nick Capola that was playing 38 to 40 minutes a game, you also had other guys that were kind of rotating in and out. So there wasn't as much pressure on him to really have to carry that team. There were other pieces around him that were able to kind of pick up the load.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this, Tibbs. I know you're a diehard ULM guy. Did you use Bet Online to bet on the Warhawks on this one, or did you just wish that you had after it was over?
Oh, I definitely wish I had. I think it was more of a timing issue of because this was a rescheduled game from the weather. Didn't realize that it was really happening on Monday until I was trying to flip through ESPN to see what was on the ESPN Plus, and there they were, and I was like, oh, yeah, that is tonight. I forgot about it.
Yeah, because Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform, and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, and I know you're not a first-time bettor, BetOnline is the ultimate game day companion with the largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA, college basketball, which we're going to talk about, to the NHL, UFC. BetOnline is your number one sports betting source for the new year. Every touchdown, three-pointer, and hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here, a proud sponsor of Fun Belt podcast and everything that comes with it, including NETtlen. So Tibbs, we're recording this here on Tuesday night, pretty late Tuesday night. Wednesday, I think it's Wednesday, right? That ULM and South Alabama meet again.
Thursday.
Okay, Thursday. So we have a little time. But do you like, as a South Alabama or as a ULM fan, do you like getting the quick rematch in this one, or are you a little bit worried that there's going to be a revenge factor going on when they go over to Mobile?
I don't know what to expect. I mean, I see it kind of as the double-edged sword, right? Maybe this is what ULM needs to kind of go on a late run, which is what you always want to do as you try to get closer and closer to Pensacola for the Sun Belt Conference tournament. It could also be the revenge factor of the Jaguars going, screw those guys. They beat us. They're not beating us on our turf, and they pound the ever-living hell out of ULM. It's really going to be an extreme in either case. I, of course, with the homer take, I'm going to say, well, maybe this is where they start the streak and they can squeak out a win on the road. Because as we know, it's not easy to win on the road. So anytime you can even get that +1 on the scoreboard, it's still a win.
Yeah, and if you're ULM, you got to go into that one with confidence, whereas maybe you lose 10 in a row, you got to be thinking, why can't we win one? Especially, you have in that time, you have an overtime loss to ODU, a team that had struggled in non-conference, and you're losing some of those games that maybe you thought were winnable going in. It's got to be tough. And now you go to Mobile knowing, hey, we can beat this team. You can tell yourself we're better than this team. We beat this team pretty handily. So I am very curious to see how both teams respond, because I'm like you. I could see it going a little bit either way. But the thing that would worry me if I'm a ULM fan is just how South Alabama has really, really blown some teams out when they're focused, when they're motivated. And will this kind of like get them back in that mode after suffering that loss?
And I think the other thing you got to watch out for is that kind of arrogance, so to say, coming into it of, oh, we just beat these guys, we can do it again. We don't have to necessarily try too hard. We just go through the motions, we get the win. And I think that that's far from the truth, because like I said, it's hard to win on the road, and it's really going to be hard to sneak up again on South Alabama this week in that rematch game.
Yeah. Hey, let's talk specifically about Colty Young, because he had that really good game against South Alabama and has been good for ULM all year. Like we talked about, they've got a handful of really good players, but he's been really solid. And coming from Jackson State, right? I about said Jacksonville State, but
Jackson State.
Yeah. Coming from there where he was a pretty good player, but now coming to ULM to probably have the best season of his career so far, at least when it comes to individual statistics. What's it mean to get a guy like that out of the transfer portal, where it's not always easy at ULM, especially in this day and age of NIL and everything else?
Yeah, I mean, it's always good when you can land those guys to kind of showcase that while Jackson State is D1, just like ULM, just like James Madison and everyone else in the Sun Belt, it's a little bit higher, a little bit better basketball, a little bit better competition that he's going to face. It also gives him a chance to kind of step away from home, knowing that he was at Jackson State. He's a Starkville, Mississippi guy, so he had never really left the state. Gives him a chance to venture out a little bit more and really make an even bigger name for himself. I think that he has really come in this 1 year that he's going to have here with the Warhawks and shine brightly. And you just got to hope that there's maybe some kind of magic 8-ball that you can shake and get him back that one more year. But with the Warhawks looking for a new head coach, would he be, if he could come back, would he be a piece for whatever this new head coach that comes in is going to want to instill?
Yeah, and I was going to get to kind of like the big picture stuff of the new coach, but before we do that, let's just talk a little bit about that game, South Alabama in general, and just the West. I know it's not strictly divided into divisions, but everybody in the West plays each other twice, and that side of things just looks kind of nuts right now. Arkansas State's in the lead, but you look at everybody, like all those top teams, Troy, Arkansas State, South Alabama, all have to go play each other home and away. You see teams lose a game like South Alabama did at ULM. I still think Southern Miss is a tough place to play, even though they're kind of up and down. Like, just how much do you see the West side of the Sun Belt kind of eating each other alive a little bit with these games?
It is, and it's fantastic though, because while I think Arkansas State is probably the most talented team that we've seen in the league in a long time, I feel that the best overall team and most talented team is that Troy team. And so whenever they get together to play, they're really fighting it out for that Thursday quadruple bye or whatever it is to put them right there into the quarterfinals, semifinals of the conference tournament. And I love the fact that the league is doing everything they can to protect those top seeds to give us a chance of getting that multiple bid, being a multiple bid league into the NCAA tournament. But with that said, I really feel that this year especially, and ULM has shown it, I think Coastal's shown it, even though their only win is against ULM, but everybody especially the West side, can beat anybody on any given night. And I love that really that football mentality has transferred over into basketball, because we definitely see it all the time in all the other sports like softball and baseball and on down the list.
Yeah, and you talk about that, the seeding and the new bracket for Pensacola. If you look at it right now, Arkansas State's alone in first, only by a game, and then you've got South Alabama, Troy, App State, and Marshall all at 6-3. JMU, Texas State, and Old Dominion 5-4. Two of those teams are going to get buys all the way to the semifinals, while a couple of them are going to have to play 4 or 5 games just to get there. Like that's nuts to look at that. It's fun, but I have a feeling some coaches are going to be like, how did we get in this situation? And is it fair that we had to play, say Arkansas State and Troy on the road when, App State didn't have to play all those days? I mean, it's kind of nuts to think about how that's all going to play out here over the next few weeks.
Yeah, and there's no real right answer when it comes to scheduling, because I don't think it's feasible to have a home and home with everybody down the list. So what do you do? Do you kind of ping pong ball it where you're going to play all 14 teams and it's just a literal draw of straws, whether or not you're playing App State at home or, they're coming to see you?
Look around. You can find cars like these on AutoTrader. New cars, used cars, electric cars, maybe even flying cars. Okay, no flying cars, but as soon as they get invented, they'll be on AutoTrader. Just you wait. AutoTrader.
On the road there, you're going to Old Dominion. But then as well as I do, somebody like Texas State's going to draw going to Marshall, to Old Dominion, to App State, to Georgia State, and it's going to kill the whole theory there of what we could do. But I don't understand what you could really do to kind of even out the balance of basketball that way. It's just going to have to be really almost divisional without really having divisions.
Yeah, I think you just live with it because for a couple reasons. One, you get your biggest rivalries played twice a year that way. I mean, nobody's clamoring for, JMU and App State to not play twice a year just so like one of them can go play Texas State twice. I mean, that doesn't really make any sense. And you don't know which division is going to be the best year in, year out either. Like, last year, Marshall could have been the one complaining, hey, we had to go play at App State and at App JMU when, those West teams didn't have to do that. Like, so it's going to differ year by year. So I still think playing it as a division schedule makes sense, even though the standings, there's no division separation in the standings. I still think that's the best way to schedule it, just for a variety of reasons. And you might have a complaint one year that doesn't even apply the next year.
What if, Shane, we play everybody in the league once, but then we have a mid-season tournament to determine the postseason tournament?
Kind of like the NBA.
Well, I like to think it's an original idea.
No, I mean, I think there are some conferences that way back when, it's even before like our time. We're old guys, but I think in the early '80s and stuff, like the ACC and the Big Eight and team, didn't they have like holiday tournaments where they kind of like just played it out? I don't even know if it counted for anything, but it was just kind of like a fun thing to do in the middle of the season. You could implement something like that, but I don't know. I like the way the schedule works out this way. You miss somebody, which is kind of unfortunate, but it's usually, I can't think of a time where like anybody was like, well, man, it's really unfortunate that, Coastal Carolina and Southern Miss didn't play this year. Like, it'll happen sometimes, but nobody's really ever had a big gripe when it comes to the team that they didn't play in a particular year.
I think the Southland had that going for a while, where they did a midseason tournament to determine postseason seedings that way. But yeah, it's definitely something. I don't know how you kind of tweak it. I don't know if I'd like also necessarily the new conference tournament bracket, because literally we all want to see the Cinderella, right? We all want to see that 13, 14 seed represented the championship game. Sure, it screws the league, but we all want to see the miracles. But if that were to happen, you're in Pensacola for over a week playing basketball. Does that alone just kind of make it to where it's probably not going to happen?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't think we're ever going to see like even a double-digit seed probably make it all the way to the championship game. That would be tough. And even when they do, like we've already seen it, like the teams had to play 1 or 2 extra games when they get to the championship round. They're just usually gassed. So it's tough. And honestly, those first couple days of the tournament for the people, I don't think I'm going to even be. I've gone to the tournament since Jamie's joined the conference. I won't be there for the first couple days, like even if Jamie's playing, because like that's going to be depressing to see like only like the bottom teams there. The building will be empty. That'll be rough. But I do think then once you get to the weekend and you've got your best teams playing in the quarterfinals and on, that it's going to be really exciting, especially if, you get a Southern Miss or South Alabama or some of those teams that could bring a lot of fans. If they get to that point, then I think that really helps the atmosphere later on. And like we said, it's best for the conference if you have a good team win the tournament. I mean, the Cinderellas are fun, but at the end of the day, at the end of the week, you want to see them make a little run, but you don't necessarily want to see them win it.
Unless it's your team, of course.
Yeah. But if you're counting the money from the NCAA tournament payout, that's not what you want to see.
Yeah. The other thing, going back to scheduling, that I wish they would do is to bring back the doubleheader. I wish that even if it wasn't a symmetrical schedule, like say James Madison was hosting Marshall, that the men would have that and the women play that. Even if it was like the women were hosting Georgia Southern, I would love to have the doubleheader basketball games brought back.
Yeah.
What do you think on that?
Even if you just sprinkled in a few of them throughout the year, where, I think you could end up with the same teams in town. Like it's probably doable. And like you said, even if they're not playing the same teams, the double headers are fun. I think you get bigger crowds that way, 2-for-1 tickets. Fine. Like most teams aren't relying on ticket sales for women's basketball for revenue anyway. So if you get a few extra people who will come for a 2-for-1 deal, like it works out great for everybody. I would love to see that too, even if it's just once a year.
Yeah.
So Tibbs, I said we come back to it. Let's talk a little bit big picture about where ULM is, because obviously riding high this week, but hit on it. This is Keith Richard's last season. That was announced a while ago. They're going to be looking for a new coach, and not so much who the actual candidates for that job are, but what's the profile of the candidate that ULM will look for to replace a guy who's been there for a long time. Like, it's kind of hard to believe somebody's been at a mid-major program for that long. What is it, 16 years? 16 years? Is it 16?
15.
15 for him. Yeah, that's a hell of a run. But I think pretty much everybody agrees it's time for ULM to move on. But what do they have to look for in a new coach?
I think the biggest thing, good, bad, or indifferent, they want Brian Vincent to coach men's basketball. And by that, Vincent has a kind of need list and a want list. We all want the new stadium. We all want the new locker room. We want the new uniforms that are interchangeable and whatever. But that's not always necessarily what you need to be able to compete. And I think that this new coach that comes in is going to have to really define what they need from AD John Hartwell in order to put together that team and right the ship, and not focus on we don't have a lot of money. We don't have, the nicest facilities. We don't, and start going with we do have this, we do have that, and really try to drive that home and make the best of what you can. Because really, if you lay that foundation and take what you do have and you're successful, you can then build upon that, because the support's going to come, which means the bigger, better, faster, stronger roster, the newer, shinier objects, whatever. But you've got to win and win with what you got, and make sure that you're riding the ship.
Yeah. When you said they needed a Brian Vincent, my first thought was, one, a guy who has a little bit of a chip on his shoulder because of, Brian Vincent thought, he should have had another head coaching job or two probably before he got ULM, UAB especially. And then at ULM, we've talked about this before, I think on the other show, is, it's a great place to recruit JUCOs, which I think is going to be even a bigger deal if this rule sticks, that you get extra years for playing, or that your JUCO eligibility doesn't count against your NCAA eligibility. Like, even more so, recruit Mississippi and Texas and even Kansas are great places to recruit if you're ULM to begin with. And those are the best JUCO states in the country. Like, I could see ULM building something off a lot of those guys who, just frankly aren't going to go to LSU or somewhere out of high school because of whatever issue. And then they get a chance, coming to ULM after a year or two at a place like, Garden City, Kansas, or, whatever, Texas, or, obviously Mississippi and Louisiana have some good JUCOs too.
Yeah. And I think that's going to be the profile. And I think also you're going to have somebody that can recruit his ass off and really find those diamonds in the rough, gamble on some players that maybe have some stank on them. Maybe you even have a head coach that has some stank on him that really ULM is taking a chance on them just as much as they're taking a chance on ULM and being successful. Because let's face it, we know the perception of ULM is that it's at the bottom of the barrel, the bottom of the barrel. And so if a coach can't win there, that it really kind of gives them the perception that they can't win anywhere, regardless of the resources. Whether that's a good perception or not, that is usually the perception. And so I think that's also true for the roster guys as well, that if they can play there, they can play anywhere.
Yeah. And, people talk about like winning the press conference and like, I don't even think ULM necessarily with the Vincent hire, you don't even necessarily like win the press release with that. Like you're hiring a coordinator from New Mexico. Like on paper, that's not the kind of thing that just automatically gets people excited. But then if you dig a little deeper, you find out like this guy had a whole lot to do with UAB getting where they were under Bill Clark and everything. And so like, I kind of think on the basketball side of things, it'll be similar where, whoever it ends up being might not be somebody who like, oh, I know that name if you're just a casual fan. But once you start to dig into what John Hartwell is able to do and what he finds, he'll find somebody I think who fits and who knows how to build a program.
Yeah, and some of the early names that I can't really dive into, they're names you would know, and especially if you're a basketball fan. If you're kind of the casual, yeah, I know they put 5 guys on the floor, you're probably not going to know who they are. But as a basketball fan, you'd be like, I didn't know what happened to that guy. Now I know.
Yeah. Yeah. So want to go on and on about this, but, just if you had to make a prediction for kind of where the direction of ULM basketball the rest of this year and then going into next year as they kind of try to finish this one out strong and then they build off of that with a new coaching staff, where do you think ULM's going? Is basketball heading in the right direction with making this change?
Yeah, I think it's definitely the right time to make the change. You just got to hope, though, that it is the right time. And by that we as a ULM community are ready to kind of get behind basketball because they're just now really starting to show the support, the love for football. Can they add something else that people are willing to get behind and support? Because, I've always said, even if Coach K came to the Bayou, without the support, he probably wouldn't be Coach K.
Yeah. Yeah. The one thing I think you do have going for you, though, is, 4,000 people in a football stadium looks pretty sad, but 3,000 people in a basketball arena can make a lot of noise. So, the bandwagon can start kind of small on the basketball side of things and grow with time. And, I think it's possible, especially, recruit JUCOs like we talked about, things like that. You could put together a fun brand of basketball pretty fast with a young, energetic new coach who kind of, brings things to the table, gets out on campus and gets people excited about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely have to be somebody that can't just be a basketball coach. They got to kind of be the cheerleader, the fundraiser, and everything in between. But I think that's kind of the nature of, or the state of mid-major basketball. That's just what you got to do to make it and to be successful.
Yeah. All right. Well, before we get off of here, I'm going to put you on the spot to tell me what's going to happen Thursday in the rematch. I need a prediction. And how many games, now that the Warhawks have won one in conference play, how many are they going to end up winning before we all head down to Pensacola?
I think that Thursday's really kind of a trick question there, Shane. So I appreciate you putting me on the spot there for that. Yeah. Playing a team back to back is it's one of two ways, right? Either what you've done, you do it again with that game plan. Maybe it works a second time, maybe it doesn't. But I feel pretty strong that there's also a big revenge factor of South Alabama not wanting to not only have that next loss, but the back-to-back losses to the team that was the bottom dweller in the conference standings. With that said, I think that ULM kind of has a breath of life in them. I think that they can really be able to pull out the game and start a little bit of a streak. I don't see them beating Troy on Saturday whenever they face them, but I feel like Troy is starting to hit their stride and going. But next week, Monroe takes out the vengeance from when Delta Airlines was stolen away from Monroe for Atlanta, and they're going to beat Georgia State next week.
All right. I like that prediction. Hey, well, I appreciate you jumping on with me, Tibbs. Talk a little bit of Warhawks and some other aspects of Sunbelt basketball. But that'll just about do it for us tonight. You've been listening to NETtlen. Once again, that's part of the Fun Belt feed on the Believe Network. So thanks for tuning in with us.